Hi, I'm Arvin Vora, co-author of the book Invitation to the Ivies, and today we're going to talk about perseverance essays. Many students write essays about persevering against setbacks, and sometimes that's because that's just the required essay topic, and sometimes they just want to write about that. And it's a good idea. As we talk about in the book Invitation to the Ivies, perseverance is the hallmark of the hero archetype. So perseverance is a great thing to write about. And you might be writing about, for example, trying to build a robot. You're facing all these setbacks, you overcome them and eventually build this robot. Or maybe getting a higher grade in the class. You get a low grade, you struggle a bunch, you have some setbacks, you get a higher grade. Or maybe something athletic. You're not that good at a sport, you work out, you work really hard, and then you get good at the sport and you're successful. And the problem is when you write those essays, you often run into the same problem, which is that you write it and it's terrible. It's so boring. It just falls flat. It has no emotional power at all. And you might be confused. You might say all right, well, maybe I just did it wrong. So maybe if your one essay is about trying out for a sports team, then you try to do another one about building a robot, and it's equally terrible. So the question is, what's making your essay fall flat? And to answer this question, we need to understand this fundamental principle in all stories. In all stories, you have an external conflict that represents an internal conflict. The internal conflict is an emotional, psychological conflict. It might be a conflict between guilt and forgiveness. It might be a conflict between shame and self-worth. It might be a conflict between anger and acceptance. It could be a conflict between anything. In the external conflict in a story, the character, in this case you basically, the character needs to face the external conflict, and in the struggle with the external conflict, he has to resolve the internal conflict. In other words, the story is not really about the external conflict. A story is never about fighting dragons. A story is never about, anything big, and it's not about shipwrecks. The story is always about the internal struggle of the character. And those other things bring that out and symbolize it. But ultimately, every story, the important parts of every story take place within the character, not outside of the character. And in your essay, there has to be an internal struggle. Now, creating an internal struggle is difficult. It's much harder than creating an external struggle. Creating external struggle is just like have anything set you back and then you overcome it. But until there's an internal struggle, you're not going to have a story. You're not going to have a powerful essay. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can add an internal conflict or create an internal conflict, an internal struggle. First way is to do it authentically, and that is going to involve a lot of introspection. It might involve talking to an expert about that and really starting to study and think about your own emotional struggles. And if you're saying, well, I don't have any emotional struggles, well, that's not because you don't have any emotional struggles, that's just a lack of self-awareness. And at some future point, hopefully you'll develop a little bit more emotional awareness and you will become a happier and more successful and just overall better person. Now, that's one way to do it, is to actually do this hard emotional work, discover and reveal these internal struggles, and use them as the engine and fuel of your essay. That's option one. That might be a lot of work, or you just might not want to do it. There is unpleasant, so it might not be something you want to do. The other options, you can just make it up. Great novelists, great filmmakers, great movie screenwriters, great playwrights, they make stuff up and it can still be very emotionally powerful because they understand that the external events don't really matter. The internal events really matter. So the other option is just make it up. Figure out what you want this sort of made up internal struggle to be about, and then see how you can make an external story resolve the internal story. Let's say you want to have the internal struggle be between guilt and forgiveness. Well, then this basically what needs to happen is at the beginning, the character needs to feel guilty and angry about something or other, and that guilt should be both directed inward towards himself and outward towards another person. And at the end of the story, the character should find a way to forgive both himself and the external person. And that's the real story, right? Then on top of that, you can put any story you want to. The outer coding, the actual external events, they don't really matter in any real way. They're kind of like that little thin outer coating you see on medicine. I mean, like, it doesn't make any difference what that is. What matters is the inside stuff. So you put any external events that you want to on top of it, as long as those external events are setbacks that are running in parallel with the internal struggles. If you don't have an internal struggle in your essay, you cannot possibly have an emotionally powerful essay. So the key of all of this is to recognize that, yes, the hero perseveres, but that persevering struggle is much more about his internal turmoil and much less about the external setbacks than you might think. And if you make the internal struggle the heart and soul of your perseverance essay, you're going to have a powerful, emotionally powerful essay that's going to really stand out and help you get in. If you guys want to learn more about how to use hero archetypes and all this kind of stuff, yeah, check out our book. It's called Invitation to the Ivies. It's written by me, Arvin Vora, and Chelsea Snyder Singh, and you can get it at Amazon, libraries, everywhere else. If you want to learn or get more information about it, check us out at invitationtotheivies.com.